Hey everybody, it's Johnny Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to the Battle of Leuthen, 1757, the 7 Years' War by House of History. Now, if you haven't seen my reaction to the other episodes of this series about Frederick the Great by House of History, I suggest you check them out before you check this one out. And the usual disclaimer when I react to anything historical, if I don't show so much what is considered a proper reaction, is probably obvious I don't know much about the subject at hand, and if I do know anything, I'll most likely will pause the video to give my input or ask any curious questions, which hopefully will be answered in the comments below. So with that being said, the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go and subscribe to House of History, another great history channel here on YouTube that deserves a lot of support because they do amazing work, just like most of the other top history channels here on YouTube. So yeah, without further ado, let's get this up on the screen and see what happens. And I'm sorry if I butchered the pronunciation of this location. A snowy morning, December 3rd of 1757, Parschwitz, Lower Silesia. 1 month after the legendary victory of the Battle of Rossbach, the Prussians once again were outnumbered by a much larger hostile army. The soldiers were worn down, having marched 320 kilometers, 200 miles, in 12 days. Yeesh. Frederick the Great addressed his generals, regimental and battalion commanders preceding the Battle of Leuthen, and it became known as the iconic Parschwitz Address.
The enemy holds the same entrenched camp of Breslau, which
hang on, sorry for these videos, because some of the like European words that they use in there, I'm not sure how when they're pronounced, I'm not sure how they're spelled. I don't know why, but for these I always put the captions on for this series.
Defended so honorably, I am marching to attack this position. The decisive moment is approaching. Contrary to every rule of art, I shall attack the army under the command of Prince Charles, even though it be 3 times my own strength, wherever and whenever I may meet it. The number of the foe, the strength of their position, are here matters of but secondary importance.
Wow.
All these must yield, I feel confident, before the unflinching bravery of my troops and the judicious execution of my orders. I must venture on this step, or all is lost. I fully recognize the dangers attached to this enterprise, but in my present situation, I must conquer or die. If we go under, all is lost.
That must be a horrible way to feel, where you feel like you must conquer or die. It's hard to tell, and if you've seen the recent episodes in this series, you know how much pressure Frederick the Great is during the 7 Years' War.
I love this 1906 painting by Hugo Ungewitter. It displays Frederick the Great and his generals at Born preceding the iconic Battle of Leuthen.
Wow.
If you love art and history, it may be a stretch to ever own a work such as that, unless you have...
Feel free to check out the sponsor if
In
you're
late
interested.
November, dispatches reached Frederick of the Duke of Beveren's retreat after the Battle of Breslau. Frederick was livid, and he ordered Beveren to relieve the city, or to face capital punishment.
Oof.
Within 3 days, the remaining garrison surrendered Breslau, and Frederick learned the Austrians captured Beveren. All major Silesian strongholds, his exquisite defense against any invasion from the south, were in Austrian hands. Describing the situation as serious is an understatement. His army camped at Parschwitz for a week until December 4th. It became the central hub. Meanwhile, in the Austrian camp, Prince Charles learned of Frederick's position at Parschwitz. He figured, heavily outnumbering the Prussian king, this was the time to strike. Disregarding advice for caution, he wanted to strike at Frederick fast to prevent him from fortifying his position. He sent the army's bake ovens and a small corps ahead. Espray writes that Charles did not even consider the possibility of Frederick attacking him. On December 2nd, Ziethen's column of demoralized soldiers arrived at Parchwitz. The Prussian army numbered some 33,000, many of them battered, worn down, and tired. Of course, the armies were strengthened by the soldiers' tales who fought at Rosbach, and Frederick's attitude towards his men certainly played a vital part. Frederick was never more close to his army than at Parchwitz. During these winter days, the king camped in the open air like one of his private soldiers. He used to warm himself at their fires and then make room for the others to take his place. He talked with the soldiers as if they were of his own kind. He sympathized with the travails which they had undergone, and in the most friendly possible way, he encouraged them to behave like heroes just once more. The constant desertions of forcibly enlisted Saxons and other uncommitted soldiers left Frederick with a loyal, battle-hardened force. On December 3rd, Frederick himself, approaching exhaustion, prepared for the assault against the Austrians. He promised his drained men wealth and promotion. He expected the Austrians to barricade themselves around Breslau, utilizing its strong natural fortifications. In the early morning of December 4th, the Prussian army departed. Skirmishes with Austrian hussars revealed the Austrian army was close, but nowhere to be seen. It wasn't until that evening Frederick learned the Austrians abandoned this stronghold around Breslau, and they were within a day's marching distance. Frederick couldn't believe his luck. The plain they...
I mean, doesn't seem very wise to abandon a well-positioned fortification, especially with your enemy so close. Sorry, I'm just a little bit confused by that, because unless he's trying to lure Frederick, unless Charles of Lorraine is trying to lure Frederick in. But I'm sure it'll say
was the same plain the Prussian army conducted its autumn war games. They knew it through and through.
Wow.
That night, the Prussians camped weapon in hand without fire. It was freezing. In the distance, they saw the enemy's campfires. Frederick fielded around 12,000 cavalry in 128 squadrons, slightly under 23,000 infantry, and 160 artillery guns. At 4 a.m. the army awoke in silence and began their march in 2 infantry columns, flanked by cavalry on either side. Frederick rode among the vanguard with hussars and light Jaeger infantry. When the morning mist faded, a wide, open plain covered with light snow appeared. Frederick could likely name every village in the region, allowing him to give his subordinates clear instructions for deployment. Frederick reached the village of Born, where the Prussian cavalry engaged in a slight skirmish against Austrian and Saxon hussars. These were quickly routed, and 600 prisoners were taken. 3 infantry battalions held Born while Frederick climbed the Schönberg. Here, he saw the Austrian deployment, a vast line from north to south, spanning some 8 kilometers, faced him. The Austrians had just finished deploying.
Sorry, I missed that
30
bit.
kilometers, faced
4
him.
miles.
The Austrians had just finished deploying. Earlier that morning, the Austrians were marching when news of Frederick's advance reached them. It caught them by surprise. 2 lines extended from Nipperen to the south of Leuthen. To the left rear, Nadashti manned the reserves. The Austrian army was significantly larger than Frederick expected. Prince Charles commanded between 65 and 70,000 troops. 5,000 of them were irregulars. The Prussian vanguard's march towards Born led Charles to believe the Prussians would attack his right flank. This flank was protected by the Zettelbusch, the only extensively wooded area of the plain. Meanwhile, the Austrian left did not enjoy many natural defenses. In addition, the Sophienberg provided a perfect cover for his army to maneuver itself to the Austrian south unnoticed. For his plan to work, the Austrians had to be convinced he was attacking their well-defended right flank. He deployed 1 infantry and 1 cavalry unit in full view of the Austrians on the right. Charles saw these maneuvers and called 9 infantry battalions from the south to augment his right flank between Nippern and Fröbelwitz. This was over an hour of hard marching away from the southern tip at Saarschütz. As the Austrian infantry moved from the south to the north, the exact opposite happened, behind the hill. It was past noon when the first Prussian columns reached Lobetins, removed from the Austrians' view. The columns swerved to their left, approaching the Austrian flank. Zieten rode far in advance towards the final line of march near the Schweidnitzer River. With the Prussian columns moving into their positions, Frederick rode towards Radaxdorf to observe the enemy. Prince Charles noticed the Prussian maneuver, but initially figured it was a diversion. He ordered the second line of infantry to break up and move to the south to augment the southernmost lines. These were held by German auxiliaries. The mobile Prussian artillery positioned itself on the Glanzberg. Around this time, Moritz of Anhalt-Dessau warned Frederick that in midwinter the days were very short, and it was already past noon. Frederick agreed, and he gave the order to attack. He warned all his regiments to advance slowly, leading to a textbook oblique order formation with his right flank engaging in battle first. The German auxiliaries at Saarschütz received the brunt of the damage, putting up surprisingly fierce resistance. They realized they were outnumbered, and many on the left flank broke. Nadashdi countered Zieten's charge, and fierce combat broke out to the south of Golau. Meanwhile, the Prussian artillery opened fire, tearing into the Austrian lines. Zieten's cavalry proved to be too strong, and Nadashdi's cavalry broke. Charles realized he would not be able to remedy the southern flank with his reserves, so he ordered his entire army to bend to the south. The Austrians formed up in a line through Leuthen. Meanwhile, the mobile Prussian artillery deployed on the Butterberg and Judenberg, opening a devastating volley of fire against the Austrian lines. It was 3:30 p.m. when the second phase of the battle commenced. The Prussians launched a renewed assault against the newly formed Austrian line. The fiercest combat concentrated inside Leuthen, where savage door-to-door fighting broke out. Some Prussian battalions were beaten back, but the Prussian artillery compensated by opening a deafening barrage against the village. After half an hour of fighting, the Prussians seized a burning Leuthen. However, strong resistance behind the village continued. Then, the Austrian cavalry swerved down from the Austrian right. If successful, they could have easily turned the tide of the battle and crushed the Prussians from their left. But stationed nearby Radaxdorf, Lieutenant General Georg Wilhelm von Driessen commanded the reserve cavalry. Uncommitted and noticing the Austrian charge, he launched a countercharge. His cavalry clashed with the Austrian right. Heavy combat broke out as the Austrians attempted to find their footing. When it appeared the fighting would shift in the Austrian balance, the additional Prussian cavalry reserves came to Driessen's aid. The Austrian cavalry crumbled before the Prussian cavalry charged into the Austrian infantry lines north of Leuthen. Entire battalions threw their weapons away and fled, or surrendered. Any soldier who attempted to make a stand was overrun by his comrades fleeing for their lives. The entire Austrian army collapsed into a run.
If you've seen other historical videos that I've reacted to on my channel, you've seen this happen where, like, you know, troops coming to the aid of their comrades sometimes get overrun by their comrades that are fleeing the battle.
Driessen's cavalry provided the nail in the Austrian army's coffin. Against the odds, Prussia emerged victoriously. Darkness soon set in, and the surviving Austrians fled towards the Bohemian hills. In total, the Prussians suffered 6,382 casualties, about 1,200 dead, and the remainder wounded. The Austrians lost 22,000 men. Over 12,000 were captured, over 3,000 dead, and 6,000 to 7,000 wounded. 17 generals were among the dead and wounded, and 116 pieces of artillery and 51 standards were seized. They lost up to a third of their effective army fielded against Frederick.
Wow.
An enormously high percentage.
Leuthen. Greatest victories of the century. The battle is a masterpiece of movements, maneuvers, and resolutions, enough to immortalize Frederick and rank him among the greatest generals. Manifests in the highest degree both his moral qualities and his military. Oh, that's sorry, I just saw that down there. Like that was written by Napoleon Bonaparte. Because if you remember, Napoleon was a student of history, and he regarded the history of Frederick the Great with respect. Because when his troops entered Berlin after I think it was 1805 that they crushed the Prussians, or humiliated them, whatever way you want to put it. But when he visited the tomb of Frederick the Great, he made his generals take off their hats and bow as a sign of respect to Frederick the Great, because Napoleon respected him quite a lot, or quite a bit. Sorry, there's a probably better way to say that, but...
Not just contemporary observers and later historians refer to the Battle of Leuthen as Frederick the Great's finest moment. Even Napoleon acknowledged its genius.
Yeah.
Just like at Rosbach, everything went right for Frederick. The knowledge of the battlefield, the extended enemy lines, and the cooperation.
And that's another thing people underestimate, is like how much knowledge of the area does certain commanders have, and how to exploit certain parts of the geography of the area. Like you said, like you've seen in the Battle of Leuthen, that large section of hills to screen the Prussian army's movements to south of the Austrian left flank.
Of Prussian commanders like a well-oiled machine, all thanks to those autumn war game trainings.
Yeah.
The artillery, infantry, and cavalry worked together perfectly, with subordinates taking initiative whenever the opportunity presented itself. It ended up leading to victory. Frederick did not launch a pursuit until 2 days after the battle, leading to most Austrian soldiers escaping across the border. Some sources indicate these didn't escape, but rather were pushed by Frederick's belated pursuit. The implications of Rosbach were enormously favorable regarding the French. The implications of Leuthen made an astronomical difference. Frederick faced down and beat a high morale, well-equipped, and recently victorious army. If the Austrians had beaten him, the Kingdom of Prussia would have been no more. There was no alternative to victory. After the defeat, the Austrians retreated into Bohemia. They still held Schweidnitz and Breslau. Frederick subjected Breslau to a severe bombardment, and within 2 weeks, the entire garrison surrendered. Still, you can imagine the atmosphere in Vienna.
Oh yeah.
Every face is marked by anguish and panic, and the general dismay is much more intense than it was back in May following the defeat at Prague. The end of the 1757 campaign cemented Frederick's reputation as a great military commander. But Frederick himself wasn't in a triumphalist mood. He told his subordinates Leuthen had been a sticker plaster on his wounds. It had not healed everything.
No.
He saved the relief of Schweidnitz for the next year's campaigning. His army took up winter quarters. The campaign of 1757, an incredibly prolonged campaign, came to an end. Prussia fought an unusual number of battles, yet an epidemic hitting the winter quarters killed more soldiers than all those battles combined. Still, the campaign was extraordinary, with a surprising number.
Another thing that can affect a soldier's health in war is illness, like typhus or dysentery. Just remember the lack of medical care or medical knowledge of this time.
Of reverses and twists. Frederick himself referred to it as a campaign that was like 3 in 1. But the war was far from over, and the next year would bring renewed warfare, reverses, and twists. Thank you so much for watching this video. If there's a topic, battle, person, or event you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also really like to thank all...
And that'll do it. This has been another interesting video by House of History, and yeah, there's not more I can add to that, but now you see like the comeback by Prussia against the Austrians. So it'll be interesting to see how the Prussians deal, because I very much doubt they're finished with the French yet, or the Russians. So, and I think Prussia still has to face a number of enemies, including Saxons and other smaller nations within Europe at the time. So anyway, if you like this reaction, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.